Hi, this is Gary Myers from the Daily News, and with Foley's in Midtown, continue our countdown on the NFL's top 50 players in NFL history. And with me today is Ernie Accorsi, former general manager of the Baltimore Colts, the Cleveland Browns, and the New York Giants, and Hank Gola from the Daily News. Why don't you get us started, Hank?
Number 20, O.J. Simpson. Number 19, Dan Marino. Number 18, Anthony Munoz. Number 17, Barry Sanders. Number 16, Sammy Baugh.
Number 15, John Elway. Number 14, Otto Graham. Number 13, Joe Green. Number 12, Deacon Jones. Number 11, Don Hudson.
Yeah, well, this is a great quarterback group. There are three top quarterbacks here. Quarterbacks are always measured by winning records, and you can't get more of a winning record than Otto Graham, who was in the championship game almost every year. Then we have John Elway, who had to wait till the end of his career to win a Super Bowl, won two of them, and then Dan Marino, who never won one. How do you look at these three guys?
Well, I kind of look at them the way they're rated, although I probably would have, and I did have Graham and Elway higher than where they are there. But Graham played pro football 10 years and was in a championship game 10 times, winning 7. He won in '54, and Paul Brown expected to use George Ratterman. They found out he had a rotator cuff, although they didn't know what it was then. There were no MRIs. They get Graham back. He lost the college all-star game. They coaxed Graham back. He wins it again in '55. So I think Graham is the ultimate winner at that position. There's no question, with Montana nipping at his heels as far as winning Super Bowls, and Bradshaw. And Elway, you know, Elway's the greatest football player I ever scouted. And, you know, that's hard for me to say because I also saw Lawrence Taylor. But the penchant towards quarterbacks, he could do everything that you'd ever want to do. I went to the East-West game to scout him. His father was the coach, not the coach of Stanford, the coach of San Jose State, and blew a play dead. And John, instead of just walking back to the huddle, it was practice, threw the ball across the field at a diagonal about 70 yards on a line. And our player personnel director was there, Fred Schubeck. I said, I'm going back to Baltimore. I don't have to see another thing, okay? And I also saw him at Ohio State that year where they were like a 4-win team, and they beat Ohio State on the road. So I have him as one of the great quarterbacks I ever saw in my life. Marino is a dilemma because I don't know that I ever saw a quarterback with a quicker release than Dan Marino. I mean, you couldn't get at him. You could get rid of the ball accurately, with deep. And, you know, he was a winner. I mean, he threw a touchdown pass in the waning minutes of the Sugar Bowl to beat Georgia. He did get them to the Super Bowl. He won 1.5 million games. I don't know what the reason is. He had a great head coach. Didn't have a great running game. He had some pretty good receivers, but they were little. So it's hard for me to say why didn't he win. Maybe he didn't win because he was up against, you know, some pretty stiff competition when he had a chance to win.
Shula never really gave him a shutdown defense to help him out.
That's true too. Yeah, when Shula won the 2 Super Bowls, he had the famous no-name defense. Right. They were underrated. You're right. They never did have a shutdown defense.
Ernie, in 1983, you were general manager in Baltimore. You made the right decision drafting John Elway, even though he said he didn't want to play for the Colts. And then a week or so later, Robert Irsay traded him to Denver without your permission or knowledge. But you had been in negotiations with the Raiders prior to that draft, in which you had said, okay, I'll trade you that pick if you get me 3 number 1s back. And that was close to happening. What people don't know is that if that trade did go through, you had every intention of taking Dan Marino in the top 5 or 6 picks. And, you know, ultimately you couldn't have gone wrong with either guy.
No, I couldn't have. And the fact is that, you know, I considered him the greatest prospect I ever saw, but so did a lot of people. So I said, okay, if I'm going to trade him, it's going to be the highest price I ever paid for a player. And I think the previous high price was 2 1s and 2 2s for Jim Plunkett. So I put a 3 number 1, two number 2s. The the two of the number ones had to be in this draft, and one of them had to be in the top 10 because I didn't think Marino was going to last beyond that. There were some questions about his shoulder. In those days, again, you didn't have the MRIs, or if they did, it was in the early stages. But that was my strategy. The Raiders had to get another number one, and it would have been the 5th pick in the draft, which the Bears have ultimately drafted Jimbo Covert, to be able to consummate the trade. And it was set for a while, and then it fell through. So after that happened, all I knew is that I was not going down in history as the guy who didn't draft John Elway. It was that simple. I knew what the Steelers went through for 25 years because they cut Unitas. I wasn't going to go through that. So I picked them, and I knew I was going to get an avalanche of protests, but I also didn't think, and God bless him, he's a friend of mine, and we have a good relationship, but they weren't going to convince me he was going to be the next Mickey Mantle. Because I had seen a scouting report. He might have made it, but he was going to play football.
Ernie, to switch positions here, O.J. Simpson. Probably what most of the fans of today, this generation, know about O.J. is what's happened to him since he finished playing. With a lot of people who didn't follow football during that era don't remember or don't know, this guy was just a tremendous running back, and he came in at number 20 on our list. Surprised that low?
Probably, and I mean, he's one of the. First of all, this isn't for this list, but he's the greatest college running back I ever saw. I never saw Red Grange. Okay, he was the only long strider I've ever seen that would be able to change direction. The big rap on the long striders, they can't change direction. He could. I've never seen anything like it. But there was a game the Colts played in Buffalo in 1975 where he scored 4 touchdowns in the first quarter, and we were losing 28-7. Teddy Marchibroda said, "My mother told me one day you're going to get humiliated," and he said, "This is the day." We came back, and they were all long runs. We came back and won the game 42-28 thanks to Burt Jones, but he was a devastating ball carrier, and I'd have him higher. I mean, the two greatest halfbacks, and there are other people who are going to discuss this. It was a 2-back system in those days. The fullback, Jim Brown was a fullback, and the Brown formation had the back right behind the quarterback was named after Jim Brown. So there were fullbacks and halfbacks. Brown Setz alone is the greatest running back I ever saw. But the two greatest halfbacks I ever saw were Gale Sayers and Lenny Moore. And I have Simpson right there.
O.J. Also played on a lot of frozen, bad fields. He set the record against the Jets on a sloppy game. You got to give him credit for that as well.
Yeah, and they were good teams. They weren't great teams. I mean, he did have a good offensive line that the immortal PR director of the Bills, Bud Tallman, called the Electric Company. He had more nicknames up there, but they were good. Reggie McKenzie and DeLon Malloy, I think, was on that line. But he didn't. Joe Ferguson was a good quarterback, but he wasn't playing with John Elway. And when running backs that don't play with outstanding quarterbacks don't win championships. You can go right down the list. I mean, even Jim Brown, it took Frank Ryan throwing 3 touchdown passes to Gary Collins to win the title. He never came close to winning a title other than that. But Dickerson didn't win a title. Peyton didn't win it till the end, and that was really, he wasn't even Peyton anymore. Barry Sanders didn't win a title. I was just going to
mention Barry Sanders, 17th on our list, never played with a great quarterback. No. But to me, Ernie, and this will be the last player we talk about on the list here, he was like the ultimate home run hitter.
Yeah.
He can score from anywhere in the field. But I also think he got stopped behind the line a lot, too, where it was like you can hold him to 1 or 2 yards, maybe 3-4 plays in a row, but on the 5th play, he can be gone for 70.
He's going to go 80. And a lot of times, and if I'm not mistaken on this, he was one of the first, if not the first, deep tailback. Remember, the tailbacks were a lot closer to the line of scrimmage. He would line up so deep. Yeah. And I think that was part of the fact when I said it was a long strider, because he could stop on a dime, and within 1 step, he had full acceleration. But you're right. Every play, your heart was in your throat, because you could have him 3rd and 12, and he had just lost a yard in both plays, and then he goes 85, which he did that day in Buffalo that I was talking about.
Okay, well, that concludes our discussion on 11 through 20. Ernie, we thank you very much for your time. Hank, you as well. And please join us next time when we'll finally get to the 1 through 10 countdown on the Daily News all-time top 50 players in NFL history.